Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, and welcome to another edition of Real Reviews Rewind, the show where we rewind time a bit and talk to you about older films. This week is a conversation I've been looking forward to for the last 2 weeks, and that is a conversation about Black History Month and the 3 films associated with it that we chose to speak about. And this week it's going to be 12 Angry Men, The Meteor Man, and, surprisingly, Marvel's Black Panther. And I want to first start out the conversation with the Sidney Lumet classic 12 Angry Men, starring Henry Fonda and
11 other people.
And 11 other people. Lee Cobb is one of the 11 other people. Let me first off start this by saying it's the case of a person who is accused of a crime that they feel they didn't commit. And Henry Fonda sets out to prove, through his juror number and his association with all the other jurors, that the kid didn't do it. And
well, I think to be accurate to the movie, he's saying he's not sure. He has a doubt. And he's not saying the kid didn't do it. He's just saying
the doubt is there.
He has doubt. Yes.
Yeah, the doubt is there, and he sets out to prove that doubt over the course of the film. Now, there's only a couple things I really want to say about this film, and then I'm going to let you take over. One, that first shot of the film, inside the juror room.
Yeah.
One single shot around all these different smaller events. One man helping the other with his coat. One man getting a drink of water. One man eating a tissue. All in one shot before they actually start full deliberation. How masterful of a stroke of cinematic direction is that for a film? I
agree. So I watched this movie, I think I had seen it many years ago, but I watched this movie with fresh eyes, and I was really, blown away by this movie's direction in the sense that they put you right in the midst of the action. One of the things I was reading about afterwards that kind of called my attention to it is it starts off with these overhead shots and kind of distance shots, but as the movie progresses, you get more and more close-ups.
Yeah, more tight shots, more close-ups.
And just ratcheting up the tension as the events transpire and as the conflict occurs, you get a lot more of these sort of, just single-face shots or two people, in one shot.
Mm-hmm.
Really a wonderful job of bringing you into what is essentially a play.
Yeah.
It all takes place in a single room. One of the things I really like about this movie also is it's relatively real time.
Yeah.
So you're there in the midst of it, and it could it could be a boring thing on screen, but again, due to the choices that Sidney Lumet makes, fabulously directed.
Absolutely. Special mention should go to Henry Fonda for a particularly, not even forceful portrayal of that 11th juror, but a calm presence among irrationality is what I'll call it. And I specifically want to point to the scene involving the knife.
Yes.
That to me is crucial in shifting the tide.
You mean in terms of the other jurors?
In terms of the other jurors, in terms of the plausibility of there being doubt in the first place.
I think it's a good example of how he comes back in the movie repeatedly to sort of, the way it's phrased initially, and again, this is part of what the movie does so well, is they lay out that these facts have been proven, and then he chips away at each of these quote-unquote facts to peel away and say, well, wait a minute, what about this? And what about this knife? And what about her glasses? And what about the noise going on?
How well could she see? Yeah, how well could she hear?
And the interesting thing is, and he even addresses this, is that the defense attorney, he believes, has done such a poor job that he sort of takes it on himself to make these points that the defense attorney did not make. Mm-hmm. So tie this into Black History Month. What are your emotions in terms of this disparity of justice in watching this movie now?
For me, my choice of 12 Angry Men was purely based on the fact that we're looking at a minority character. Henry Fonda said, you know, this is a kid, this is a young person. Think about your own children, think about your own lives, and the absolute defiance of the idea of, no, this kid's a minority, he totally did it, and that guilty until proven innocent factor that we so often face in this country was really what swayed me to make this my top pick for our first review of this new week in Black History Month. It tells a telling story of how crimes can be committed or even not committed, and the person themselves as an individual who has a life and a family can be overlooked, and how much it actually takes to prove that innocence. So that's where I was coming from with this choice. What angle did you come at it from?
Well, I see it as, you know, talking about Real Reviews Rewind. Sorry, there we go. It's the name of this show.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunity to go back and look at, you know, some of the pantheon of films. The other thing, though, that strikes me about sometimes going back and seeing these movies is that they are definitely of their era.
Yes.
I mean, this one struck me. It's interesting to me, just the smoking. I mean, everybody lights up, you know, and the you know, everybody's wearing suits and ties, and it's just the movie is very much of its time. I know that there was a remake later, and you feel like the script probably could have been lifted out, and you could do the same script essentially today. I mean, they could do it in current, you know, current dress, current everything. But when you watch this movie, it just definitely, and the black and white doesn't help on that. I mean, interestingly, this movie was made after color was widely available.
Yeah.
They chose to film in black and white. I'm not entirely sure why, but one of the things that does is it sort of, because you're not paying attention as much to the colors, or you're not distracted by some of those things, you're really drawn into the characters and the dialogue. And I say characters only, you know, in passing. The jurors are just given numbers.
Yeah.
So really, you're just there's juror 9, there's juror 3, you know, juror 8, and each of them becomes a unique person, and we learn them from scratch, much as the other jurors do as well.
Yeah, and it's based entirely on their personality.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, the performances are a little bit mixed. I mean, Henry Fonda is very good as this sort of everyday, you know, good guy. I liked a lot the performances of, for example, some of the juror who, one of the ones who sort of held out but came over, who is he seems to be of Italian descent. And then Jack Klugman was very good. And I thought that the juror, the second to last holdout, who I think is Lee Cobb, was excellent. Some of them were over-the-top performances. Jack Warden.
Yeah, definitely Jack Warden.
Yeah, he's a little over the top.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know, but again, of its time. You know, he's a fast-talking sales guy who likes baseball, and you know, that's kind of a staple character. But that's what he was. You know.
And again, I think the other idea of why I wanted to choose this film is morality. Like, if it were, you know, your son or your daughter in that same position at that time period, you know, how would you feel if justice was pretty much completely ignored and it was all up to these jurors to really understand and piece together what they knew? That's another thing I have to look at as an African-American male. Not that I've ever been in trouble with the law, I haven't. But in general, you know, that's something you look at. Right.
Well, and I think you see that in the way the movie starts with the opening, and there's very little discussion. They're ready to convict him and you know, head out because this guy's going to a baseball game and this guy doesn't want to spend much time. There is a clear disparity between these white jurors and, you know, any minority who's not sort of that class or of that same span. So yes, and I think that's a point that the movie makes eloquently. In terms of just the right of everybody in our judicial system to have that hearing. Here's a movie showing us a time where somebody gets that hearing.
Yeah.
But it also makes you question how many times are there where someone is not.
Would you recommend this movie to our viewers?
Very much. The other thing I like about this movie, it's a tight 90 minutes.
But it feels longer, though, right?
It does. I mean, a lot happens, you know. So, but it's certainly a movie that will catch you right into it and pull you along to the end.
Okay. I would also recommend it for any educational system that wants to use it. They should. But for home viewing, absolutely, it's a 4-star film for me. So the next film that I wanted to take a look at is something from my own past, and that is the Robert Townsend directed and starred Meteor Man. The premise of this film is that there's a substitute teacher named Jeff. I would say this, he's not particularly good at his job, but he lives in Washington, D.C., in a crime-ridden community, specifically mostly influenced by this gang called the Golden Lords. And the Golden Lords have this really weird subsidiary, which was going to be fun to talk about.
They have like a minor league system.
Yeah, they have a minor league system called the
farm team.
The Baby Lords.
The Baby Lords. Well, no, there was like a middle tier, and then there was the Baby Lords.
Yeah, there's a middle tier, and then there's the Baby Lords.
Yeah.
And essentially, Jeff has... It's kind of like a boarding house situation, almost.
Well, he has an apartment in a... Yeah, he has an apartment.
Yeah, so it's a boarding house situation where he lives with all these eclectic people. His father, played by Robert Goulet and Marla... Guillaume?
Yeah.
Okay, Guillaume. Robert Guillaume and Marla Gibbs and James Earl Jones are other tenants in this building.
James Earl Jones in this movie. I don't know who
what in the world
money
happened. Who was his agent? Fire that man immediately.
I mean, the scene where he's sort of trying on a series of wigs.
Oh, don't get me started on that scene. It's so problematic.
And then later in the movie, he's just kind of this big doofus kind of walking around.
Yeah, you kind of wonder if that guy's a schizophrenic of some sort.
I definitely was questioning where his character was coming from.
Yeah, I don't know, and I have no answer for that. In any case, Jefferson is...
Bill Cosby shows... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
We'll get to him.
All right, sorry.
Jefferson, or Jeff, I'll call him Jeff, fails at being a teacher, but, you know, he's a good all-around guy with a knucklehead of a best friend. He ends up getting things stolen from his car, forcing him to walk home. Unfortunately for him, a big giant green meteor is falling from the sky, and
in slow motion. And then it proceeds to hover above the earth and follow him.
It basically did a Raiders of the Lost Ark with the boulder going much slower. And since he couldn't do anything like, I don't know, bob and weave, he gets hit by it and suffers third-degree burns that are automatically healed the next.
Well, it implants itself in him.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
It does. So he gets hit by it and it plants itself within him, and he wakes up from the hospital the next day, being fully healed and having some interesting gifts. We'll call them gifts. He can touch a book and know anything about it in 30 seconds.
For 30 seconds. Which is kind of a nice... I thought that was pretty of a good one. His knowledge, it only lasts a short time.
It only lasts a short time, but it's a good thing to have. He also has a weird version of X-ray vision.
Yes.
That makes no sense at all.
He sees people down to their underwear.
Yeah, but...
Because it's PG.
But the whole thing with that makes no sense. It doesn't really add to the character. He also has the power of flight, which we learned because he gets shot up by the Golden Lords because his father breaks a small little butt of crack cocaine.
Yes.
From a guy who looks... Oh, no, wait, it is Don Cheadle, randomly placed in the movie.
Well, no, I think it's a young Don Cheadle, before he was...
Very young Don Cheadle, in the movie.
So, okay, but I think there's more to the movie than the plot.
Yeah.
So he gets... I'll wrap that part up for you. So he gets superpowers, and then there's some superpower scenes where he busts heads and cracked ends, and, that kind of goes quickly. And then I think the movie actually has some interesting sort of takes on the superhero genre because he is set up for this big pitched battle against the Lords, but... he starts losing his powers.
Yes, he does, because he hasn't slept enough, apparently.
That was sort of unclear.
Yeah, that's completely unclear.
Yeah. So but I think, you know, I kind of took away from it in the same way that his knowledge of the book only lasted 30 seconds, that, hey, these superpowers are a short-term duration kind of thing, which I thought was interesting. I mean, that's kind of a neat take on the superhero genre.
Yeah. For me...
So then there's a big piece at the end, and...
Yeah, I mean,
you know.
Fighting happens between the Golden Lords and the Baby Lords, and they all get into a big
fist fight, which is kind of strange, given that earlier in the show they have, or in the movie, they have Uzis and things like that.
Yeah, and not to mention that Jeff gets a black eye in the film's climax, which magically gets healed by a piece of the meteor rock, which is given to him by none other than
Bill Cosby.
Who is a mute, homeless man who basically communicates in gestures. Does that not tell anyone of anything that might happen in the future? I don't know. Look, I liked this movie as an 8-year-old because it was a superhero and it was the first African-American superhero that I had ever seen.
Right.
And that had been ever a part of my existence or thought process. The only thing really redeeming about this film as an adult is the social commentary.
Right.
For me, it's about not only, you know, not tearing down the poor neighborhoods, but building them up. But it's also about the effect gun violence can have on a community. And I think that's where its main strength lies. Unfortunately, not a lot of people have seen Meteor Man. It didn't even make a lot of money at the box office. It made $8 million, and it was budgeted for $60 million.
Right.
So it really didn't make any money. And this was a shock for Robert Townsend, who had a hit earlier with Hollywood Shuffle. Unfortunately, he got it back with Five Heartbeats a little bit. That's become a cult classic.
Yeah, I think he never truly recovered, though, from this one in the ability to make movies. You know, he had the success with Hollywood Shuffle, which is, I would say, is another movie to go back and check out, because in that one, there's a lot more commentary about making a movie as a black writer-director, which he took the goodwill that he got from that and sort of spent it all on the Meteor Man. Mm-hmm. So, and you know, I mean, it's good to see a cast of all these well-known people. I mean, you called out his best friend, that's Eddie Griffin, in an early role. But I think, you know, a lot of these, like James Earl Jones and some of these supporting actors.
Luther Vandross randomly being placed in it.
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, they kind of slip in there, Cypress Hill and Naughty by Nature, or the Crips and the Bloods.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a lot of sort of, at the time, Sinbad has actually a pretty funny role.
He
comes
does.
in. Talk about him for a second. He plays a person pretending to be black.
Yeah.
Which I'm curious that they wrote the part for him, or if that was their commentary on Sinbad, who was a pretty successful person at this time.
Yeah, he was. I don't know. I honestly don't know. That's the character that kind of missed me. I like him enough that I would have wanted to see more of him.
Yeah.
But he's also on that verge of being annoying as well.
He is, and also it was kind of strange because you sort of expect there to be a love interest.
But there isn't one.
Tease you with a love interest for a second, yeah, but then that just kind of goes by the wayside.
But don't you think that's what makes this movie unique, is that you're not relying on a damsel in distress, instead you're kind of putting forth the whole community as a distress point in DC at that time.
I think that's a really good point. I think that makes this movie interesting because of the social commentary, like you mentioned. The other thing I think that sets this movie apart is his lack of confidence in himself.
Yeah.
You know, there's actually one of to me, what struck me as a very sort of indicative scene was he's learning to fly. And he's out flying around. He's flying 4 feet off the ground because he's afraid to go any higher. You know,
Yeah.
I like the idea of a superhero who is very human and even retains his sort of humanity after his superpowers.
But the other thing that makes it weird is he almost has to be forced into helping the community in the first place.
That's right. That's right. He has to be convinced of it by his dad and
mom and the neighbors.
Yeah, and by this, you know, what happens
An
to him
old person has to nearly die by being abused by the Golden Lords.
Fortunately, it's like one, you know, sort of bandage on his head, and that's all there is to it. And So the violence is definitely very cartoonish. I mean, and I would say that makes this movie relatively appropriate. You saw this when you were relatively young.
8 years old.
So it's one of those things that, you know, it would be appropriate for people to watch with kids who, I'm not sure 8 would be, because there is gunplay and there's guns everywhere.
There's guns everywhere.
That's how DC was in the 90s. I lived not too far from DC at the time, and there were neighborhoods that were really bad, and this movie sort of touches upon that.
So the question I ultimately have to ask is, do you like this film?
Do I like this film? I do not like this film. I would not go and watch it again. I think this film has moments that are worthwhile, but I would not recommend it as in the sense of, hey, you have 2 hours? I've got a movie you should watch.
The thing Roger Ebert said, because I read his review before coming here, was it's a film with too many ideas. If it had stuck to one and ran with it, then it would probably be a much smarter, better acted film, but it did not. Therefore, it deserves, 2 stars out of 4.
Yeah. So let's talk about a well-executed black superhero movie then instead.
Yes. This weekend I saw a movie that had strong female characters at its center. It talked about the beauty of African nations as a whole, and it also looked at what it really means to be heroic in a time of great strife. But enough about Selma. Let's talk about Black Panther. So, Black Panther is the latest film directed by Ryan Coogler, the guy behind Creed, and one of my personal favorite films we didn't get to talk about, Fruitvale Station.
Which I haven't seen yet, so maybe that'll be another week.
Starring Michael B. Jordan and Forrest Whitaker and Angela Bassett.
Well, Michael B. Jordan is in all 3 of those movies. He's in Creed.
Yeah, he's in all 3. He is the glue that sticks the whole thing together.
Yeah.
Also stars Chadwick Boseman as well.
We're focusing on Black Panther.
Right.
Sorry,
Focusing
just context here, yeah.
Focusing on Black Panther. The beginning of the film takes place in 1992. You have members of Wakanda on what I'll call basic reconnaissance mission to figure out what's going on in the United States. And T'Challa's father in youth, comes to visit and says, "What are you doing with all of our, technology?" And the guy's like, "We're going to be using it to, help with the violence and things in the U.S." And T'Challa's like, "No, you really can't do that because you can't profit from the things we've made." I should also mention here that there is a 5-minute origin scene of how they got all of this vibranium, the main technology of the film, before we get to that 1992 scene. It's a great film, this movie, because after that scene, which gets abruptly cut off, we go to the present day and we see T'Challa basically still mourning the loss of his father, who died during Civil War, I believe it's called.
Well,
Captain America Civil War. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And basically he has to go retrieve his girlfriend, who's in danger in a part of Africa, if I'm
not sure she's in danger. He retrieves her because it's his father's funeral and he wants her to be there, and she's doing very well for herself at the time.
But he's also trying to protect her at the same time. You got to argue that, or else he wouldn't come in the Black Panther suit.
Well, he's coming in and disrupting a bunch of guys with guns, so he's got to wear the Black Panther suit.
This is true.
So, but I think you're.
I'm burying the lead here.
Yeah.
So basically, what happens is the funeral is going to happen. T'Challa gets challenged. T'Challa. Should I say what the intro is?
No, let's not tell the plot. Let's talk about how awesome this movie is and why it's awesome.
Okay, so why this movie is awesome, in short, is because we have an underrepresented minority group that's finally getting the chance to be shown in a positive light. Specifically, an entire continent of people being shown in a positive light and showing what they could do with the wealth and technology if they had it. But it's also a commentary on how America's African-American population is affected by lack of resources and how that can change a person and make them bitter, but also how their ideals of making a better society aren't necessarily bad, but maybe the direction of how they want to go about those ideals isn't the best.
Well, I think another thing related to that is one of the things that a theme of the movie is here these people have this wonderful society, but it's also relatively hidden from the world.
Yes.
And they have these gifts, and the one of the larger questions is, should they engage with the world and potentially lose their special, sort of closeness and harmony that they have? But is it worth doing that in order to spread the knowledge and help other people? Because there's a lot of people who they could help.
And the ancestors technically believe that no, we need to stay hidden.
Right.
All the elders say, no, let's not do that, let's not interfere. And then T'Challa's like, well, if we don't interfere, then, how are we ever going to learn and grow as a society? Why are we going to always be stuck in our ways?
Yeah, and I think that inner conflict makes for a very good theme of this movie. Some of the things I liked about this movie is, first of all, you mentioned strong female characters. I think that's huge. There were, beyond even strong female characters, there were strong characters in this movie. And one of the things that the better Marvel movies, and I would say superhero movies, but really the good ones are Marvel anyway. So,
yes.
Have good characters behind them. So, okay, maybe The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight might be the only one that's actually interesting characters. But this movie excels at that. They have many interesting characters, including Michael B. Jordan. His bad guy is an interesting character. He has a reasonable place that he's coming from. And I like that they take the time to develop and have the characters interact. That's one of the things that I thought was the best part about some of the other Marvel movies like The Avengers, was the actual interaction between the characters, much more so than the fight scenes.
Yeah, for me, the veracity and the violence of Killmonger, played by Michael B. Jordan, is completely justified in the sense of he's lost so much, but you don't know that until about halfway through the film, what he's lost and why it would impact him so much.
Right.
And that discovery of what he's lost and how it has affected him and how it affects every other character around the film is what makes this film sublimely perfect, despite its many smaller issues.
Yeah.
Because we don't get an answer to what happened to Killmonger's mother. Who took him in? What beyond being enlisted in the armed forces gave him this mentality that the world is ready to give up on African American males?
Right.
What instilled that fight?
Well, and then I think that's right, and maybe if anything, if it drives people back to the books to read some of the backstory. I honestly don't know how much there is there, but it also, the other thing I'll say about this movie is something interesting with regards to superhero movies. The fights, to me, sort of some of the best fights in the movie take place during a time where they take I'm not giving too much away, they take a sort of potion to take away their powers.
Yes.
And then have these really human level fights, which is a nice change of pace, because otherwise these superhero fights just get crazy.
There are no stakes. There are no stakes if you have the powers, I would say.
Right. And actually, I would say one of the weaker parts to me was sort of the extended fight scene at the end, where they kind of both have powers, and it's sort of essentially a draw.
Yeah.
Much like these sort of ending of the Meteor Man, tying back to that, where you have the sort of good and bad guys have essentially equal powers in this ongoing fight.
Right. I really love this film. What did you think?
I loved it too. I mean, I actually, it's funny. I had seen the trailer, and I thought, that movie looks all right. And then they turned the trailer into a cell phone ad, and I said, this movie's going to suck. Because anything that turns into a cell phone ad is probably being over-promoted. And then I was blown away by how good it was. So I strongly recommend this one myself.
I strongly recommend it as well, and if anybody wants to go back and check out the literature for Black Panther, I would definitely recommend Ta-Nehisi Coates' run of Black Panther comic books that Marvel has available at Amazon.com. For the next time we meet will be in March. I had talked about the idea of doing Brigadoon as one film, we're going to have to figure out the other at a different point.
Yes, we will.
But there will be something else we will look at. Brigadoon, in case for those uninformed, is a Gene Kelly musical from the 1950s, I do believe. So we will look at that next time on here, Real Reviews Rewind. See you guys next time. Bye.